Roger, Roger. You're good, readable. Just above the station, stepping on each other. Roger, you're good, readable. We witness.
What's going on, everyone? This is Sergeant First Class Ellis Noto with the Indiana National Guard. Here with my co-host, Sergeant First Class Robbie Schweitzer for the Lima Charlie podcast. Today we have two very special guests, two very special Command Sergeant Majors. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
I'm Command Sergeant Major Dale Shedler. I am the State Command Sergeant Major and the Senior Enlisted Leader for Indiana National Guard.
Hooah.
I'm Command Sergeant Major Joshua Butler. I am the CSM for 76th Brigade Rear, the CSM for the 113th PSB, and the J4 Sergeant Major for the state.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's a lot. Well, Sergeant Major, thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to come join Sergeant First Class Schweitzer and I. Could you both walk us through what your personal journey was to becoming a CSM here in the Indiana National Guard?
Yeah, so for me, I was first sergeant at two different units and you know, made my mistakes the first time, got it right the second time, and then was asked to be a Command Sergeant Major for the 138th Signal Battalion. And so really for me, it was trying to get to first sergeant and then later became the Command Sergeant Major. And really it's opportunity, time, being prepared, and it's a lot of it is timing, if things are open when
Right.
you're available or not. So
Yeah, and so my journey was a little different than most, I think, because I grew up as a sustainment NCO, a logistics NCO, and grew up through the staff NCO protocols, and so the leadership roles weren't really that easy for me to come by. I wasn't just kind of forced into them, and so I had to kind of force my way into the leadership program. And when I was at the 76th Brigade, I was insistent on being a first sergeant, and so I got the opportunity to be the first sergeant of HHC IBCT. I think I proved my leadership chops there, and from there, people really thought of me more as a leader at that point instead of just a staff NCO. And so when I became an E9, I applied for the 113th BSB CSM position and was able to get it. And so the rest is history.
I like how Sergeants Major, you both are, the words you've said basically said this is an honor to be a sergeant major,
Absolutely.
and you had mentioned being a first sergeant. What was it like? Did you see yourself as the E1, E2, E3 younger version, ever becoming a CSM?
yeah, so no,
Okay.
never. Like when I started as E1 because that was the lowest rank.
Right.
You know, I couldn't go any lower. But I really was new to the military. Nobody in my family had served, and like acronyms, like used to like if I ever make sergeant major, I'm never going to use acronyms or stuff like that. I used to say when I'm sergeant major of the Army, I'm going to do this and that. But really, like first sergeant was my goal because I wanted to affect soldiers for the better, right?
Right.
And first sergeant's the best job in the Army. It's the hardest job in the Army. It's the most rewarding job in the Army. And I really just wanted to get to first sergeant, and then I thought, my career would be the pinnacle of my career. So.
Yeah.
I like how you put that. Was it a similar journey for you, Sergeant Major?
Again, I think kind of parallels my my discussion on how I got there. I grew up in the infantry as a sustainer, and so the path to leadership at first sergeant and CSM wasn't that clear for me. I always wanted it. I always knew that was something I wanted to achieve, but I had to kind of carve that out for myself and make sure that I was projecting myself as a leader and a staff NCO at the same time, and so people trusted that I could do it. So to answer your question, it never was clear to me on the aspiration, but it was always something that I wanted. The path was more difficult, I would say.
You both seem to have a passion for leading soldiers, and that's really cool.
Sergeant Major Butler, so you said early on that you kind of had to force your way into leadership. Can you kind of expand on that a little bit? Because I think that's probably where some people find themselves right now, that they're not feeling like those opportunities are opening up. So what did you do to wedge that door open for yourself?
Yeah, you got to take the challenging positions, the challenging roles, and push yourself to be in front, right? As a staff NCO, sometimes it becomes just the day-to-day running reports and mundane things. You have to project that leadership chops when you're doing your job. And it really took, just me, at the time, CSM Bishop, was my CSM at 76th Brigade, and I said, "Hey, I'm ready to be a first sergeant." And he said, "I know you are. Let's give you the opportunity." And so it just kind of worked out to where the timing was right, and the position was open in the same building, and I just kind of ran with it. And being an HHC IBCT first sergeant or any headquarters first sergeant is difficult because leadership is more challenging when you're leading a bunch of field grade officers and senior NCOs, and so that's a whole nother creative challenge that you have in that leadership, and it taught me a lot. So
Gotcha. Did you find that to be a hard conversation to have, to approach, to be like, hey, I'm ready for the next step, or did you feel that you had put enough into it that you were ready to go and knock on that door?
Well, that's the nice thing about having good leadership, because Sergeant Major Bishop opened the doors for those discussions all the time.
Gotcha.
And so, I was in a perfect situation where he was open to the discussion, was talking to me about my future and what I wanted, and I just said that's what I wanted, and so it was natural.
That's awesome.
Sergeant Major Shetler, did you have, what were your key steps you took to prepare for that promotion?
Yeah, so a lot like what he was talking about, hard assignments, right? I always ask for hard assignments. My leaders recognized that I could handle hard assignments and would give them to me. And so just preparing myself, learning new things, different assignments, broadening assignments, hard assignments were good. PT, like you got to be ready to go to school at any time. And I had an advantage in my civilian job. It was pretty flexible, so I could go to schools when I needed to, and early sometimes. And so you just got to be, physically fit, well-trained, well-disciplined. That's the three things that the Chief of Staff of the Army says all the time. So,
Sergeant Major, I love that you brought that up. I was about to ask, your civilian career, how did that play a part in shaping your success here in the Indiana National Guard?
Yeah, so for me, I was 31 years in the civilian sector before I took this job, a couple of MOBs in there. I was vice president of software development for a company, and I would go to leadership school in the Army, and I'd get to lead a few people, and I'd figure it out, and then my work would see that, and they'd promote me, and then I'd figure some more stuff out there, and then I'd get promoted again in the Army, go to school, lead some more people, figure it out. My work would see that and promote me, and it went back and forth, and so I worked my way from programmer to vice president. Never would have happened without all the Army leadership training and experience and stuff like that. And so they really played off each other.
I love that.
They really did play off each other, and one helped the other quite a bit throughout my career.
So it was truly a symbiotic relationship between, and they weren't necessarily related careers.
No.
What was your enlisted MOS?
I was communications, logistics, and maintenance.
So everything, right?
Yeah.
But none of those are the vice president of a major software organization here in the United States. So you were able to play those off of each other. And that's fantastic. Yeah. Sergeant Major, did you have something similar? Was your experience similar? I know you mentioned being an infantryman.
No, very, very different. So I was full-time I've been full-time since 2002, and so there was a balance there very early on, but it was only a couple years of my civilian job and my military career. But when the balloon went up and we started really mobilizing heavily, that's kind of where it just turned on for me, and I just never stopped. Yeah. Should I get down with it?
You want to
push-ups? No. It's that there is a challenge between having your AGR full-time job and then also having your leadership role, and not letting them mesh sometimes, and allowing your full-timers to do their job. There is that challenge where you're not in their business constantly, but you're there as an asset and as as a key role for them to support. So.
And you brought up a really excellent point there with those careers meshing. How did you two manage your own career development and advancement?
So I'll tell you, I read this question and it really made me think a lot about how I pushed myself through my career, and it really is just that, right? It's I learned early that you can't have a sense of entitlement on your career and where you're going to go. You have to carve that out yourself. There's nobody there are good leaders that are going to enable you to get there, but there's nobody that's going to get you there without you pushing yourself. And if there's a culture of that we believe that somehow I'm just going to do my time and get promoted, then we're not really creating a professional organization, right? That competition, that very healthy push of yourself is extremely important. And so I always, I think this is a theme, pushed myself to do the challenging positions. If somebody said this is the hard job, that's what I wanted to do, or this was the hard school to go to, that's what I wanted to do, because I knew that would set myself up for success, and I would look different against my peers. And so I always just tried to understand what the criteria were. What's going to get me promoted this time? How am I going to do that? And I always just pushed myself to get there. There were times where I was just like frustrated, where it just felt like I was stagnant, or maybe people weren't seeing me the way I was supposed to. I thought of myself, and it just kind of pushed me to get better. And so that's really, and then, you continue with that mentality, and it really just kind of shows up, and, and then you just take on the next job and you do the next thing. So
that's amazing.
I see soldiers that want the title but not the job.
Right.
Oh yeah.
And so you got to want the job. You got to want the work that goes with it, not just the title of first sergeant or sergeant major. So that's pretty important too.
It's so much more than it's a role, it's a lifestyle, right? Yeah. And as National Guardsmen, we all have civilian careers, right? So it's 1 week in a month, 2 weeks in the summer, 39 days a year on average, but you're doing a lot in those 39 days, and you're managing your civilian life, your family, your school for a lot of our young guardsmen, and being that rank is a lot more than just a title, right? Yeah. It's embracing that role.
Yeah. So I also, when we talk about, like he talked about wanting to be a first sergeant,
right?
And so I was up in Elkhart, Indiana, in a unit as an E7, and I wanted to be the first sergeant there, and the battalion headquarters was down in Indianapolis, and so I transferred down to Indianapolis to be on the battalion staff. And I requested an office call with the battalion sergeant major, and I said, hey, when you replace the sergeant major in Elkhart, I want you to consider me. I'm going to work here for the next couple of years. You'll get to know me. You'll get to trust me. And then I hope that you'll put me back in. 9 months later, they fired the first sergeant for whatever and put me in there. And so that's kind of that, taking the career in your own hands and trying to figure out how to best get there. And so that's what people need to do is ask for those hard assignments, prove yourself to the leadership, and then get them.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So kind of staying in this realm of owning your career, EPS is kind of a mystery, right? Especially if you're a traditional guardsman. Like, nobody really knows exactly how it works if you're on the traditional side. So could you just kind of walk us through that process and how, as we're moving into a new EPS cycle here in the next handful of months, what our guardsmen can do to best prepare themselves, apart from taking the hard assignments, going to the right schools? What other aspects of their career and professional life can they work on so they can be the most competitive on those boards?
Yeah, good question.
Let me start with this one.
Yes,
so I can't walk down the street without somebody asking me about the EPS system.
It's important.
Or the broke EPS system is what I hear a lot. Whatever, and it's fine. And I have some numbers here actually, but when we do EPS boards, and you've been on them, I've been on them, it's hard to evaluate soldiers, and it's hard to differentiate between soldiers based on NCOERs, and at E6, E7, E8, these are boards where somebody's looking at your packet. And so 75% of there's like 600 points in a score sheet. 75% of that is performance and potential, right? 75% and over 40% is potential. And so we're looking at, people with potential for the next rank. People with potential for the next rank. Past performance plays into part of that. That's a big part. But the other 25% is duty assignments and PT and college, and that makes up only 25% of the score. And so really it's potential for the next rank, and it's hard to judge that on NCOERs because they all read the same, and everyone's in the top 10% of people I rate, and all kinds of silly stuff. So we have to be creative, and it's not perfect, but we're tweaking it every year. And we're trying to make it better, and right now, we have to look at all these other categories, but I say all the time, just because you have a master's degree and you score, max PT test doesn't necessarily make you a good leader. You might be a good leader, but that doesn't make you a good leader. And so we have to figure out how to judge potential better going forward. And we're working at that in different ways, but it's hard. It's hard to do.
So sorry, go ahead, Sergeant Major.
Yeah, so to tailor off of that, we're constantly assessing the program, and the program to its core is fundamentally sound, but we're just constantly tweaking it to make it better for the soldier, engage that total soldier concept. It's something that he constantly says. It's just the total soldier concept, and how do we look at that fairly in the different programs, right? Through the different MOSs and the different rank structures, and and even into the leadership positions. The biggest challenge that we see on the boards is just administrative data. Soldiers missing NCOERs and things, and that can be challenging, right? Because a lot of that has to do with your leadership being involved and getting the NCOERs completed. But as a soldier, and as a soldier who wants to get promoted, it is imperative that you take that ownership on your evaluations. You have to do your support form, and if you don't have a support form completed, then shame on you for assuming that your potential is going to shine through with your senior rater. And then a lot of people are worried or scared that when they see their evaluation, if something's missing, to bring that up to the rater or senior rater. But it's absolutely your job. I mean, that's why it comes back to you before signature. Having that discussion with your rater and senior rater, saying, hey, maybe not about how you were evaluated, whether you were far exceeds or exceeds, but maybe they missed a bullet that they didn't kind of shape you into, what you think you are. And so having those discussions with them is imperative, because a lot of times our senior raters are more disconnected than we'd like. And as he talks about potential, that one paragraph and that one rating gives you 40% of what you're being evaluated against. And if you're not involved in that block, then shame on you for what the board is seeing, because the board is seeing that for the last 3 years. And so every evaluation means something. And I know that it can be, going back to it being confusing or not understanding it. But really, when you think about what a total soldier is and what you want your soldiers to be, that's who you need to be in your evaluations, and that's who you need to be as a soldier. And as long as the administrative data catches up, which is where we see the biggest issue, then generally you're going to do well. It's almost as predictable. If you're missing 1 or 2 NCOERs, that's going to put you middle or bottom of the pack. Yeah. And you're missing that time. It's almost like you wasted that year because now you got to wait another year because that evaluation is missing. So be on top of your evaluations. Be on top of your leaders on getting your evaluations done. And if you're a leader, make sure that the soldiers are getting their evaluation. That's why it's so difficult as a senior NCO, is because you're always like, our NCOERs are delinquent. We got to get on top of them. And it seems like it's a mundane thing, but it's extremely important.
So critically important to the development of the soldier.
So a couple other things is we just recently pushed out the score sheets in a weekly frago to the field, so soldiers can look at how they're being evaluated on the score sheets. The actual points aren't on there. It just says, weighted heaviest, weighted least, and stuff like that. But those score sheets are out there. So look at that and see what you're being evaluated on. And the other thing is we always need members to be on the EPS boards. The best way to learn about EPS is to sit, volunteer to be on one of these boards. We'll bring you, if you're traditional, we'll bring you on orders and put you on a board for a couple days, and then you can go back and explain it all to your soldiers. So
gotcha.
We're go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I just where you it's really where it opened my eyes to where the program is. I think there's a perception that it's a good old boy system, that it's just a bunch of sergeants majors that go in a room like, I want this guy, that guy, and I think it used to be that way. I truly do. Maybe 2 decades ago or whatever, when
I got promoted.
Yeah, it was difficult. But it really isn't. It is really a very fair and equitable process. It just, and it's laborious, right? We're looking at hundreds and hundreds of NCOERs, but I encourage anybody who wants to be a part of that, just we'll put you on orders. You'll come down and you'll be a part of it, and you'll see how it works.
Where would someone go to find out more about how they volunteer for this? Is it just their readiness NCO, or what's the best
Yeah,
traditional
readiness
soldier?
NCO, or even the EPS team in the J1 shop.
And what does a typical day on a board look like? Knowing that typical is the
Laborious.
operative word
So
here.
you get access to a bunch of like IPERM records basically, and so you look through NCOERs and PT tests and school 1059s from schools, and and then you take notes, and then you do some evaluation, some points, and then you move on to the next one, and it's just constant sitting at a computer.
Gotcha.
And
Looking at people's records.
Yeah, and there's a lot of checks and balances. So there's 5 people that are looking at one soldier at any given time. And so it's about that average of how those 5 people grade you. And so it doesn't, so if one person doesn't particularly see you as a good leader, but another one does, that usually balances out. And there's even a fail safe in the system to where if the group of people is too far off, they have to reevaluate and come back to a better consensus. So they tighten it up.
Yeah, the difference between the high and the low scores are too far. They'll make you look at it again. So
and the IGs there. I mean, there's we've got people from if we have questions on schools or medical or anything like that, we can ask all those questions to those experts.
So have a better understanding of what potentially is going on with that soldier through that
Exactly.
EPS year.
Yep.
Gotcha.
But it gives an opportunity for, we as a National Guard, we are a state-based organization, right? So we live here, we work here, we serve here, right? So, but we're offering our force, our enlisted force, to have buy-in to promoting our own leaders.
Yep.
That's excellent. That's a really, really cool opportunity. What are some of the things that you had mentioned a few moments ago, Command Sergeant Major? You had mentioned the individuals who are basically rating everyone in the top 10%, right? What are some good ways? Are you comfortable saying what are some good ways if you have that great leader? What should you be doing to make sure that you're taking care of them as a raider or senior raider?
yeah, really, it's NCORs is a big thing for promotions,
Right.
But getting them into schools and getting them into promoting them, we want to get them promoted ahead of their peers, right? If they're in the top 10 or 15%, we want to get them promoted ahead of peers. And so it's setting them up with schools and with assignments and with NCOERs that put them in the top 10 or 15%, because that pyramid gets small. I have some numbers here. For traditional soldiers, we have 1,200 E6 authorizations in the state, roughly 1,200 E6.
That's across all
That's
MOSs.
across all MOSs, traditional soldiers. When we go to E7, it goes from 1,200 to 700, right?
Oh, wow.
So that pyramid gets a little small.
Yeah.
When it goes to E8, it goes from 700 to 200. So that's a one in every 3.5 soldiers that was E7 will make it to E8. And then 70 E9s. So that's like a 1 in 3 opportunity from E8 to E9. And, if you get an E9 that stays in there for 4, 5, 6 years, that pyramid gets really small. And so we got to work at that. And even with AGRs, we got 283 E6 authorizations, 268 E7. So that's not too bad. But when it goes from E7 to E8, that's really where the bottleneck is. We got 55 E8 authorizations. That means only 1 in 5 E7s
We'll make it.
to E8, and then 19 E9. So 1 in 3 from E8 to E9. And so if you're not in the top, 10% of the EPS list, you're probably not going to make it, especially from E7 to E8. And that's where we see, the hardest struggle with AGR soldiers.
Gotcha.
And you had both. You had mentioned Sergeant Major. You had mentioned total soldier concept. You had mentioned potential. What are things that I can do as a leader to make sure that I am exhibiting my potential and I'm defining it so my leadership can see it? Because I want to get promoted, right? We all want to get promoted.
Yeah.
So what are some steps that I can take as a leader to make sure that I am maximizing my potential or showing my potential?
Yeah.
So I'll tell you, you got to start off first by looking at how your subordinates feel about you, right? So we can get wrapped around the fact that we want to get promoted and what we want our careers to do, but if we're focusing on how we're leading our soldiers and how then that's going to push us forward. Start to get this bigger group of people, sometimes you start to feel more disconnected from the actual leadership role. You got to find a way to really connect with those soldiers and understand what they need and how to be a good leader. And that really kind of shows, right? Because, leadership is not just about how you are fundamentally doing or how you are achieving. It's about how that group is moving forward. And if you're not focusing on that, you could be missing the mark. I know we're talking about, getting promoted, but
No, you're right. Absolutely. That's leadership, though.
yes, absolutely.
What a powerful response. To see how you, as a leader, we're gonna have to look at how your subordinates feel about you.
Yeah.
Which brings up a great question: is how, as we as National Guardsmen, how can we maintain great relationships with our subordinates, our peers, our superiors? What are some steps that we can take? And some self-evaluations we can put on ourselves.
So I'll tell you, honesty and communication, right? Like, honesty is key. You can't be fake. Soldiers see right through fake. And so you gotta, you really gotta be upfront. And there's one of the sayings we have in our primary leadership training is trust is built, by the drip, and it's lost by the gallon, right?
Yeah.
Like, you can build trust for years and years and years slowly.
I like that.
And do one thing,
Yeah.
and it's all gone.
Yeah.
And so soldiers see through fake. You gotta be honest and true, and you gotta care about them. Like, teach, coach, and mentor. Right? We teach, coach, and mentor 2 levels down in the Army. That's what we're supposed to be doing. And so that that first sergeant should be teaching, coaching, mentoring his staff sergeants. That sergeant first class platoon sergeant should be doing his team leaders. And it's showing that you care about their career, helping them improve, helping them reach their potential, because you've been there and you're 2 levels. You're far enough away where you can see the bigger picture now, and you can see the important things at the higher level, and so helping them reach their potential. And we should all be helping our soldiers reach their potential. Man, that is key to being a leader.
Yeah, I often say basically say the same thing, but I often tell when we do our NCOPDs is sincerity, compassion, and dynamic, and it just kind of fulfills all those things that you said, Sergeant Major. And if you can try to be those 3 things, that leadership, those fundamentals will come together, and you'll be more visible and more approachable as a leader.
I really like that both of your take on leadership is about your people and not necessarily being the best or most expert in your field. It's about investing the knowledge and time that you have into the development of your soldiers. I think that's a really good way to look at it. Once you make E5, E6 for sure, it's not about you anymore. It's about your soldiers. Like, if people that are in it for them, they need to go. Yeah, because they're in it for the wrong reason. And it's really about taking care of your soldiers. And if you don't want that responsibility of soldier care and soldier mentor and soldier relationship, soldier reaching their potential, man, you shouldn't be a leader, because
You're on the wrong field.
You're in the wrong field.
So in that realm of building good relationships and being the best leader that you can, what were some pitfalls that you ran into early on that you would advise up and coming leaders to be aware of so that they can avoid those same pitfalls?
Let's see.
Right, there's so many. We don't have time.
Yeah, right.
So for me, like, I was good at leading by example and some of that stuff, but I was horrible at delegation and time management.
Yeah.
Right? Delegation, I came up, and you go from E4 to E5, and now you're in charge of these dudes that you were smoking and joking with, and like, it just felt weird. Like, if I can do it, I'm just going to do it. I'm not going to delegate it. But what I learned is, as you grow up the ranks, you don't have time for everything. Yeah. Like, everything, all the stuff that comes across your desk and your inbox, it's like, you would never get anything done. You would fail.
Yeah.
And so you got to delegate. There's some stuff that only you can do as a command sergeant major. There's some stuff that only you can do, and that's the stuff you got to do. And the other stuff that other people can do, you got to delegate it so you can get out, walk the line with your soldiers, trip the line, with your soldiers, and get that pulse, especially as an enlisted leader. Officers enlisted have different roles, but time management and delegation, it was hard for me, and I'm still, I still work on it. But it's, I don't
I
know
think-
what your areas are.
I think it'd be fair to say that by not practicing good delegation, you're not developing
Absolutely.
Oh, right.
your subordinates.
Right.
If you're always jumping in to do it, they're never going to learn and gain the confidence in their own skill set.
Or fail, and allowing that teaching opportunity to say, this is how you do it better.
Yep.
Right.
And failure, I'll let you finish. Failure, like, the old days of knife hand and jumping up and down and screaming and yelling when people make a mistake. Like, we got to get over that. That never worked, I don't think. But now it's like, if we squash that initiative, some young E5 that's taking the initiative, and we squash it by jumping all over them for some minor mistake, that's a teaching moment. That's where you bring them in. It's like, what were you trying to do? Where did it go wrong? How are you going to do it different next time?
Yeah.
All right, go try again, man.
Yeah.
And that's what we got to do instead of, the old school Army, in the movies where you got
Right.
Stay off the grass,
Sam
put your hands out of
Elliott.
your pocket.
We don't have time for basic training on our 1 week a month. That time is so valuable.
Yeah.
We have to make sure that we're offering those opportunities. I think I cut you off, Sergeant Major.
No, you didn't cut me off.
Sorry.
I was just being, I was saying, staying off the grass and get your hands out of your pockets. You grew up as
Reflective belt.
seeing the sergeant major and thinking that's all he does, and it really, working to change that dynamic. But I would say one of the biggest challenges was the work-life balance. We often forget about, what that means at home, and making sure that you're setting that example so that way your soldiers believe that that's important as well. Because it took me a while to get there. It took me a while to figure that out because I was so focused on how do I get to where I want to be. And I was leaving some crucial things behind, and it caused me to be a worse soldier, a worse leader. And so that was probably one of the biggest challenges. And the other thing I think we forget about when we become, especially E7 to and above level, is mentoring officers, and how crucial that is. And it took a battalion commander to tell me, hey, I want you to mentor these company commanders and these LTs. And it kind of just clicked with me that that's my role as well. And so we often forget about that because those are the ones that are making the decisions for the soldiers that we want to impact. And if they're making the wrong decisions and we're not enabling them or developing them appropriately, then we're at fault too. So.
I've seen that a lot, Sergeant Major. My current role is with the ROTC program here at IUPUI, and I have seen that the impact that NCOs have both on the cadets and really, they're not even their first years, but as they grow through the ranks, there's always that senior enlisted NCO paired with that officer. Both to advise them on the needs of the enlisted force and to offer them, advice on overall leadership. That's it's a really good collaborative partnership, and I think that we sometimes forget that. But that's such a great, excellent point you brought up. Thank you.
Well, and General Ellis used to, on our division mobilization, he would say, "Sergeant Major, you're the last line of defense against stupidity." Right? And I took that role pretty serious. When some officer, our enlisted person would come up with some dumb idea, I would have to go talk them off the ledge and let's not be stupid here. So.
But you'd have the opportunity to collaborate with that leader and walk them through, like, hey, how did you get to this decision? How can what are you hoping to get out of this, and really getting a better overall result, right? And helping develop that leader. Even in those conversations, you're always developing. I love that.
Yep.
What other advice do you have for collaborating with these leaders? I mean, what are some examples that you have of opportunities where you've collaborated over your careers?
Yeah, so communication, right, is hard, and it gets harder every day. And every AAR ever done, needs improvement. Communication, like Washington crossing the Delaware, needs improvement in communication, right? Like it's hard, and it changes as you go up in rank. Like how I communicate now is different than when I was a team leader or a squad leader or a first sergeant. And so you got to figure out communication. That's really the key. And we have so many electronic tools now that are great for communication, but also take away some of that personal that personal touch when you're dealing with people. So I'm a big fan of the Indiana National Guard app. There's communication techniques in there. You can set up calendars and chat groups and all kinds of stuff. And I really I want to push that because as we develop that further and further, that's a great tool for that. And just anything like, my aide and I are I guess friends on the Nike Run app, right? And I can see how many miles he runs every month. He can see how many miles I run every month.
It's a pretty cool app I'm using.
And I'm very good at making sure he never beats me in miles because I don't want him talking trash.
That's the competition
Yes,
in my household right now.
Yeah,
that's
who has the
awesome.
most miles. I won last month.
Yeah.
I'm behind this month. So we'll see how it goes.
So and I don't cheat, but I
here we go.
wait till the last minute and then put in a couple miles if I need to. And
Where you can't fit it in.
Whatever.
Yeah.
But there's all kinds of ways to stay in touch and communication and that's you got to figure out what works for you and your team, right? Like this is my squad. How does my squad communicate? How's that communication work and what's effective and what's not working? If it's not working, change it. Try something else.
What a great example. So, just because we're leaders to them, maybe 1 week in a month, there's still the opportunity to communicate with them all the month. Hey, I'm beating you this month on the Nike Run app or whatever it is. And it's not just the traditional texting, but there's so many opportunities for us to connect and mentor those soldiers.
And really, we talk about like passing the PT test, right? It's a huge thing to me, right? It's one of my 3 things is PT. And whose job is it to get a soldier to pass the PT test? Was it the master fitness trainer for the unit? Is the company commander who owns PT? Is it the first sergeant who executes it on behalf of the company? It's that first line leader, right? Yeah. They provide purpose, direction, and motivation. Right. Which is leadership. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So they need to provide purpose, direction, motivation to get their soldiers to pass the PT test. And so you can't do that waiting on drill weekend. You got to have that communication throughout the month. And, whether it's Nike Run app or, if you're a truck driver and you work in an office, you probably have different schedules. Like, do you have different PT plans? And what are you eating for lunch if you're a truck driver? Like, McDonald's ain't the answer unless it's McRib season.
But
you got to get McRib, at least one.
But finding that connection to your soldier, even if you're not, in the same realm, office and truck driver, finding those unique connections with those soldiers, building those long-term bonds, because they're going to trust you, right? They're going to trust you as their leader, and it speaks to what you had said earlier. How do your subordinates feel about you? That was an excellent point. I just want to bring that back up. Do you have anything to add to that, Sergeant Major?
Yeah, the communication. So I think when you put the wreath on, sometimes your subordinates feel you're unapproachable, right? There's a lot of times I get a phone call and it's like, "Hey, I'm sorry for bothering you." You probably get that too, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's the first thing they say, and so you got to try to get out of that mentality to where they know they can call you no matter what, and you're going to prioritize them. And so somehow, that really takes you reaching out to them, or maybe it's just a text, "Hey, how things going today?" Or if they have something going on, "Hey, how's your work situation going?" And just being more approachable really kind of opens the gates for that dialogue and discussion. I just had that conversation yesterday with the first sergeant. He's sorry for bothering you. He's new. And you're never bothering me. Yeah. You're always going to be important. I'll always take time for your phone call. So
I really love that.
Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about like how important different aspects of leadership are, the things that to try to avoid, the things that you should try to capitalize on. What do you feel leaders can do to continue to stay relevant through the course of their career and have an impact on their soldiers apart from the things that we've already discussed a little bit?
Yeah.
I just say stay passionate and stay challenged. If you find yourself in a situation where the next position's not enticing to you, or the current position is just kind of not pushing you along, it may be time for you to look something else, or maybe if you're at that time where you maybe need to retire. You have to love it. You have to love leading soldiers. You have to love being out there. Otherwise, that sincerity, that visibility just goes away. Everybody knows you're faking the funk when you just show up and you're just, there to get that next paycheck or, entitlement or whatever. So I would say you have to stay challenged and passionate.
Yeah, and really, you got to keep growing, right?
Yeah.
You got to learn at something every day. And so, I read something every day, whether it's, the report from the morning update or whatever, like new techniques, new technology, new doctrine, stuff like that. You got to kind of stay up to that. And so There's in November came out a new FM 622, Developing Leaders. And it goes through chapters of, it's an easy 192 page read or whatever.
Perfect.
But it goes through chapters, like all the important things about developing leaders and developing yourself as a leader. There's the NCO guide, TC 7227 or something like that. Like every NCO should browse through the NCO guide. So like learn something new every day. If the day we stop learning, man, that's the day to hang it up, because if you think you know it all, it's time to go home.
Right.
And then, not necessarily the last question, but my last question for you is, so we travel back in time a little bit. We got PV1 Butler, PV1 Shetler. Like, what's the key advice that you would tell yourself, just a few years ago, right?
Excellent question.
Yeah.
I don't even know. Don't give up.
Yeah. Yeah, I think anything's possible. I mean, that's a tough retrospective look, but as a PV1 in the National Guard, I guess I didn't know if this was going to be my career or what was next, and I guess I had some really good leaders, and just trusting those leaders and kind of moving through and continuing to grow. I would say always, the Guard's got to give back to you. You can't, you're not a servant to the Guard. It's got to give back to you. And so you always got to look to, what's in it for you and what's pushing you along, I guess.
Do you feel like there was a singular moment in your career that was like, okay, this can be the thing, or is that kind of the whole thing? Like looking back on it, it's all just woven to the point where you are.
I would probably say, so as an AGR soldier, it's been kind of different. I think your path was probably built a little different than mine, but it became a career at that point. When I became AGR full time, I didn't necessarily think that I was going to do 20 and get out, but it was something that I was passionate about and continued to push me, and so I just continued on that path. It was probably when I made E7 where I thought, okay, this is it. This is what I'm going to do when I grow up, and I just kind of stuck with it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I joined active duty and did a couple years in Germany and joined for the Army College Fund at the time. And really was planning on getting out and going to college and getting my software degree and doing some computer programming and having a good happy life. And coming off active duty, like, hey, if you go to the Army Reserve, you get an extra $50 a month to the college bill plus drill pay and annual training. And I'm like, all right, whatever. I was really enthused about it. And then field artillery unit got deactivated after the Gulf War stuff, and National Guard dude came over and it's like, hey, just try 1 year in the National Guard. And I did. And really, that was when I got to start leading soldiers, and it just clicked, like being a leader and taking care of soldiers and that responsibility was something I wanted. And I kept going, and I thought, man, if I could ever be a first sergeant, I could really make a difference in my soldiers' lives. And so that was kind of when I got to about E6, E7, it's like, man, I want to be a first. I want to make a difference, because I really took, the good and the bad from different leaders along the way, and kind of figured out how I wanted to do it. And that was kind of the turning point for me was, man, if I can get to be first sergeant and make a difference in some soldiers' lives and the training and all that kind of stuff, that was it for me.
I love how you two, both sergeant majors, you have humanized the rank, right? I mean, we've said it a few times now, but we're used to the stay off my grass, knife hand. But at one point you're like, hey, I'm almost disenfranchised. Like, I did it, great. I'm gonna do it for the Army or do it for the college fund. But then you realize the
impact that you have on people's lives.
Yes, of these soldiers who are serving their country and state. That's incredible, and it is obtainable, and that's a really interesting perspective that you have shared with us. I know Sergeant Schweitzer had asked, is there something you would offer a younger version of you? Is there something that you would offer someone who's thinking about joining the National Guard? We are so much more than what you might see on TV, right? There's so many opportunities in the National Guard. What is one piece of advice you'd have for someone who's thinking about listening to this, thinking about joining?
So it is the great equalizer, right? When you join, it's what you put into it and what you want to get out of it. It doesn't matter if you were poor or rich or what ethnic background you come from. Like, everyone has an opportunity in the National Guard to excel, whatever they want to do, whatever they want to become. I grew up, I joined for the Army College Fund because large family. My parents grew up Amish. Like, we didn't have money to send me to college, and so this was my chance, and I wanted to make the most of it. And we had, my parents beat us into a good work ethic and that kind of stuff, but in the farm and that kind of stuff. But it really is, you can become whatever you want in the National Guard. And I think, we're both proof of it. Yeah. It's what you put into it, what you get out of it. And so what do you want? Like, come in with your goals of what do you want to get out of military service, and don't let anyone stop you, and have checkpoints along the way, and meet them. It's attainable.
I love that. CSM Butler, was your experience the same? What advice would you offer to someone who's thinking about potentially joining the National Guard?
So it's intangible, but I think it's been said a lot that soldiers get in for the benefits, they stay in for the relationships.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And it really has a lot to do with that, being a part of something that gives back to you. That's it's the friendships, it's the bonds you create that you love and you grow with, and that's what keeps you in. I had an E7 brief at a retention briefing just recently. He says, over my career, I really hated going to drill, but I loved being here, and that's like resounding. Like, that when you get in the door and you see all your friends and you have those relationships, that's a lot of times what makes retention easy. If you have an organization that is like a family, soldiers just want to stay. And so, the person that wants to be a part of something and has that desire and passion to build friendships and that cohesiveness, this is where it's at.
And it's such a unique type of relationship compared to any other realm in your life. I was very much I'm going to do my 6 and be done.
Yeah.
And in about a week, I'll be hitting 13 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it was actually Sergeant Major Shetler when I was in the 215th ASMC, and so you were
Troop Command.
I was there
You
too,
actually called and we had a conversation about whether or not I was going to ETS. And that followed with an ADOS opportunity. I actually was like, you know what? I can do this a little bit longer.
I'd like to say I remember that.
What?
You absolutely.
I've talked to a few soldiers over my days.
But yeah, so that was something that's always stuck with me. So
So that phone call made an impact in your career.
Yep.
And because he made that phone call for you to potentially think about staying in, how many people have you enlisted into the National Guard, and you've changed those lives? So that one phone call as a leader can impact so much of our National Guard. What are some words of advice you might have for a leader, a future leader who's hoping to make a positive impact here in the National Guard?
Go ahead and start.
I think we kind of that's kind of a summation note, right? Kind of what we've all talked about, and I think it really is just about what we talked about, being sincere and approachable to your soldiers, and making sure that they're important to you, and you're compassionate. You understand them. You understand who they are. And that when you become a first sergeant, he said it was the most rewarding job, and battalion CSM, I believe, are probably the most rewarding jobs, because you get to make that impact. You get to know those soldiers. You get to help them, and those success stories help you continue, and they keep you passionate and keep you involved. And so I would just say, find that niche and make sure that you're getting to know your soldiers and always pushing yourself to make those impact on those individuals, not just the organization.
Thank you, Sergeant Major.
Yeah, and really, like, being engaged.
Yeah.
Right? You got to be engaged if you're going to be a leader. You can't just show up on drill weekend if you're going to be a leader. If you want to be a leader, you got to be engaged, and that means, building teams, positivity, all that kind of stuff. That's super important. And so be engaged, and then anytime I got into a leadership position, I always picked 3 things. Like, there's 3 things that I'm going to focus on while I'm in that position. And so then if you get those 3 done, and I'm a firm believer that these positions are high burnout, and so 3 to 4 years should be your max, and either move up or move on or move out.
Yeah.
But pick 3 things for those 3 years and try to make a difference in those areas that are your key topic areas. And really, you know, that's like, this is my squad. We talked about it a little bit ago. Sergeant Major of the Army's initiative. And, you know, Sergeant Major of the Army's always had these crazy initiatives. And I always say whatever. But this one really gets, this one always really got it right. Like, it takes care of our 3 coercives in the Army, the suicide, the sexual assault, harassment, extremism. And it's about bringing everyone into the fold, right? The people that are out on the fringe are the ones at risk. The ones that aren't in the group, that they're holding up the wall on their phone at drill, those are the ones that are at risk for all that stuff, and we need to bring them in. And so building that positive team is so important for a leader, and you keep doing it no matter how high you get up. You keep trying to build these positive teams where they're functional and they work and they get things done, and people know each other enough to ask the hard questions and get the organization moving forward.
Absolutely. I definitely appreciate both your time this morning, Sergeant Major. Is there anything you feel like we could add to this conversation?
No.
We've talked about a lot. Sorry.
Yeah. Thanks for having us on here and letting us talk about some of this stuff. We do appreciate it.
Well, State Command Sergeant Major Settler, Sergeant Command Sergeant Major Butler, we definitely appreciate your time this morning. Thank you for coming on the Lima Charlie podcast.
Walking us through leadership, EPS, all that jazz.
Absolutely.
Hey, if you have questions about any of that stuff, reach out to me. I'm dale.a.shetler.mil.
At army.mil.
At army.mil.
But I field questions from soldiers all the time, and it's not a hassle. It's part of my job. So if you have a question, reach out.
Absolutely.
Engage your leaders.
Yep.
I love that. Well, thank you again, Command Sergeant Major. Lima Charlie out.
The station's stepping on each